In studio tonight, the lovely husband and wife team, Marv and Rindy Ross of the band Quarterflash. How are you guys doing today?
Hey, we're doing great.
Doing great.
Yeah, it's so funny. I mean, the 80s music, I think, is definitely coming back around. It was kind of on the back burner there for a little while, but I think, it's a new generation of listeners, and there's really not a lot of radio stations. They play the 80s hits, but they just don't tell the stories, and, that's why I love doing these interviews with these band members and group members, because, you kind of get behind the scenes on how the music was all planned out.
Yeah, it's funny because we've noticed a real resurgence in interest too in Quarterflash and Hard My Heart in particular.
Yeah, what a great song. I remember kind of dating myself, but Quarterflash, the debut album that you guys did, was one of the very first albums that I ever bought when I was a little kid.
Right. We were little kids too.
Exactly. Good one, Rindy. I like that. That's too funny. So tell me a little bit about both of your personal backgrounds and where you both grew up, and who were you both listening to musically growing up?
Well, we both grew up in the Portland area, Portland, Oregon, and actually met in our junior year of high school, and have been really together ever since. It's really kind of amazing. And I was most influenced back then by the folkies, the Judy Collins and Joni Mitchell and that kind of stuff, that real kind of edgy, at the time, kind of edgy folk stuff was what I was interested in, Bob Dylan, stuff like that.
Yeah, when we met, we had pretty different musical tastes. I liked Dylan, but I was listening to a lot of the Stones stuff at the time, and the Beatles and the Doors. So those were the primary, influences on me. I mean, I loved all rock and roll. The whole British invasion was a big influence on me in high school. And, but I think Rindy was a little more folk-oriented, and I was a little more rock-oriented, and I think our sound sort of meshed with her vocals, not really being bluesy rock, but being more from the folk thing, and my, guitar stuff was a little bit more on the rock and roll side.
So I know you guys grew up together and met each other in school. Now tell me a little bit about the days when you guys were both going to Western Oregon University.
Well, we actually played in our very first band together. We were side people in this band. It wasn't our band. It was a band called Broom Street. It was mostly folky type stuff, but Marv definitely influenced that band by doing a bunch of writing for the band. And hereto, before we joined, there really hadn't been a writer in the band, and so it kind of drifted toward a little bit more of a rock thing even then. So that was really the first time we played together, and we kind of got hooked on the idea of whatever we did, because we became teachers after that. But we always knew that we wanted to do music together.
That's awesome. And I know you guys did do some teaching for a few years, and then you both started gigging once again around, and you formed the band Seafood Mama. What's the great story behind that?
Well, Seafood Mama is a line from a Fats Waller jazz swing tune called Hold Tight. And it was just one of those wacky things that caught on. And so that band, Seafood Mama, had a really interesting mix of sort of hot swing and rock and roll. And it played all kinds of different styles, but that was the main thrust of that band. And actually, we slowly in that band developed the sound that became Quarterflash years later.
And then how did you guys get signed to Wildfire Records?
Well, Wildfire was basically our manager's little independent label, and so we did our first try of making a recording was Harden My Heart, and we did it just locally here. In fact, we made the first version in our basement. The drums kind of sound like oatmeal boxes, and we put it out in the Portland area, and it did so well that that was really a great thing for our manager, Jay Isaac, to take with him to L.A. and try and get us signed, which he did to Geffen Records.
Which is an awesome story in itself. Now let's back up just a little bit. Now, how did you guys meet the other members of the band Quarterflash, which became Quarterflash? Was it kind of like a mix between both of those bands, Seafood Mama and Pilot, or how did that all come about?
It was. It didn't really start out that way, but originally we were, after Seafood Mama broke up, we decided to put a new band together, and we went out looking at bands, and one of the first ones we saw was a band called Pilot. Now, we knew one of the people in that band from a previous band that he had been in called Sand. That was Jack Charles. But the drummer was the first one who we really thought, wow, that guy's an amazing player. We should ask him if he'd like to join in Quarterflash. And that was Brian David Willis. And that was just one of those funny things where pretty soon the 4 people out of the band of Pilot eventually became members of Quarterflash. So it was Brian David Willis, Jack Charles, Rick Gelinardo, and Rich Gooch.
And then how was that amazing single, Heart in My Heart, how was that song invented?
Well, a friend of mine had given me a copy of a tape that he had made of songs that he had written, and one of them was a song called Heart in My Heart. And the song really wasn't very together, but the title was really catchy, and I asked for his permission to use the title of the song, and he gave me that permission. And so for years I didn't write it, but later on I was looking for a title. I had sort of got the melody and the chords, and then I remembered that title, and it just seemed to fit right into the pocket of what I was writing. And the song came very, very fast. Rindy came down, and I had sort of a little bit of an idea for the saxophone solo, but she really came up with that big hook at the front. That was it. It was one of those things that you don't, it's just sort of like just serendipity. It just came out really fast. I think I wrote it in 2 days.
Then I know Geffen Records soon released your self-titled debut album, Quarterflash, and the great follow-up hit single release, Find Another Fool. How was that song developed?
Well, that song came about probably 6 months after Hard in My Heart, and I think what Hard in My Heart did was, it was sort of a breakthrough for us, because up to that time we were searching for what was the sound that we were going to try to put together. And Heart in My Heart really defined that with the saxophone, Rindy's strong vocal, and yet sort of very melodic at the same time. Find Another Fool has a great verse melody, which I really like. So, really the thing was is that after we had Heart in My Heart, I think I wrote 3 or 4 songs in a row. That one, Right Kind of Love, and maybe Try to Make It True. I think those were kind of came real fast in succession once we had the idea of using the saxophone sort of as this big hook thing at the top of the songs, and then having Rindy have this real strong presence in her voice. That was really sort of how it developed.
Yeah, Rindy has an amazing voice.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. I just dug out the old vinyl of the debut album and listened to it last night, so it's fresh here in my mind. And I know once the debut album did hit the market or the streets, so to speak, you guys hit the tour with Elton John and Linda Ronstadt and all those great artists. What was that experience like, being on tour with those people?
It was really amazing. As I look back on that, I feel so fortunate that we had those opportunities, especially Elton John, because it was huge venues. We were playing for a lot of people, which when you have a new record out, that's really what you want. But as novices to the arena world, the sweet thing about opening for him was that he was such a prince of a guy, because the very first date that we did with him was Red Rocks out of Denver, and we were really nervous. And before the show, he came back himself. He didn't send his manager or some lackey. He came back himself and brought a magnum of champagne for the guys and a dozen red roses to me, and said, "Welcome, and we want this to be this great package, and we'll give you sound checks." And it was just like, wow. And it was wonderful. He was and that's how the tour went. He was really good to us, and there was no ego stuff.
Right.
I mean, he knows he's great, and so there wasn't any kind of not give the opening act a sound check so that the closer looks great type stuff.
Right.
So it was sweet.
So what are you both working on as far as projects, solo projects? Do you guys have anything coming up or working on anything right now?
Well, we had just released an album called Goodbye Uncle Buzz, and people can check it out at quarterflash.net and listen to samples. It was a really fun record to make. We kind of went back and drew upon the things that really inspired us, from Joni Mitchell to Bob Dylan to all those things, and we sort of, in a way, tipped our hat musically to these people that influenced us. I mean, there's a little bit of Neil Young on there, there's a little bit of Beatles on there, there's a little bit of that, and we just kind of took a little piece of this and a little piece of that, and then kind of drew upon our own personal family history growing up in Portland together and stuff, and the songs all kind of emerge from our childhood.
Very cool. And so if anybody out there in the radio world, because we broadcast here in Southern California, we also broadcast around the world at ksbr.org, they can always go to your website at quarterflash.net.
Yes.
Wonderful.
They can listen to the samples there and find out where the band's playing and that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Marv and Rindy Ross, for being a part of the show. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, JJ. Appreciate it.